Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one battle after another, a film that doesn't try to be comfortable or polite. And honestly, that's what makes it stick with you. This is one of those movies that feels messy on purpose. Loud in some moments and strangely quiet in others, like it's daring you to keep up. The first time I watched it, I walked out feeling like I'd just been dragged through decades of unfinished arguments, broken ideals, and unresolved history. It's not a clean story, and it doesn't want to be. Paul Thomas Anderson takes a world inspired by Vineland and reshapes it into something more personal, more chaotic, and very much about consequences. At its core, this is a story about people who once believed they could change everything, and now have to live with what that belief cost them. The film opens by throwing us straight into that past, when ideology still felt sharp and dangerous. When revolution wasn't a memory but a daily risk. We meet Pat Calhoun, known as Ghetto Pat, and Perfidia Beverly Hills, both deeply embedded in a far-left revolutionary group called the French 75. These are anti-polished activists or romanticized rebels. They feel reckless, impulsive, and driven by a mix of anger and conviction. During a tense operation breaking detained immigrants out of the Otay Mesa detention center, the tone is immediately set. The scene isn't heroic in a traditional sense. It's aggressive, uncomfortable, and chaotic. Perfidia, in a move that feels both calculated and deeply unsettling, sexually humiliates the commanding officer, Stephen J. Lockjaw. It's not played for shock alone. It establishes power, humiliation, and obsession, all in one moment. Lockjaw doesn't just lose control of the situation, he loses something more personal, becoming fixated on Perfidia in a way that feels dangerous and inevitable. Out of this chaos, Pat and Perfidia grow closer, their bond forming in the middle of violence and shared risk, and before long, they become lovers. But this relationship is never framed as stable or safe. It's passionate, impulsive, and always one step away from collapse. When Lockjaw later catches Perfidia planting a bomb, the film leans into moral ambiguity rather than clear lines. Instead of arresting her, he lets her go, extracting a promise that she later meets his twisted demand. It's a moment that shows how power can rot people differently. How corruption doesn't always look like brute force, but sometimes like quiet manipulation. Time moves forward, and Perfidia gives birth to a daughter named Charlene. This should be a turning point, a chance for something resembling normalcy, and Pat desperately wants it to be. He tries to convince Perfidia to slow down, to settle into some version of family life, but she refuses. To her, the cause still matters more than safety, more than motherhood, more than stability. She leaves Pat and Charlene behind to continue her revolutionary work, and the film makes it painfully clear that this choice will echo for years. Her path leads to arrest after she murders a security guard during an armed bank robbery, a moment that feels like the violent endpoint of her uncompromising ideology. Lockjaw re-enters her life in a new way, offering protection from prison in exchange for betrayal. Perfidia accepts, giving up names and locations of key French 75 members. She enters witness protection, while Lockjaw uses her information to systematically hunt down and execute her former comrades. The revolution collapses not in a blaze of glory, but in quiet, brutal efficiency. One of the surviving members, Howard Somerville, manages to save Pat and Charlene by giving them stolen identities. They become Bob and Willa Ferguson, disappearing into obscurity as Perfidia flees witness protection and escapes to Mexico. The film then jumps 16 years ahead, and the contrast is striking. Bob is now living off the grid in the sanctuary city of Buckton Cross, California, a place that feels like a fragile bubble holding back the outside world. He's paranoid, heavily reliant on drugs, and constantly looking over his shoulder, shaped by years of fear and unresolved trauma. His daughter, now known as Willa, is a free-spirited teenager, intelligent and restless, but increasingly frustrated with her father's substance abuse and emotional instability. Bob has raised her on a carefully curated version of the past, painting Perfidia as a heroic figure rather than a complicated one, and this half-truth sits at the heart of their strained relationship. Meanwhile, Lockjaw's story has moved in the opposite direction. Through aggressive anti-immigration efforts, he has climbed the ranks to become a colonel and a powerful figure within U.S. security agencies. His past, however, threatens his carefully constructed present. When he's invited to join the Christmas Adventurers Club, a white supremacist secret society, he realizes that his past relationship with Perfidia could destroy him. To erase that risk, he decides Willa must die. He hires an indigenous bounty hunter, Avanti Q, to capture Howard Somerville, which triggers a distress signal to the remnants of the French 75. Lockjaw uses an immigration and drug operation as a cover to send troops into Bacton Cross, turning the sanctuary city into a battlefield disguised as law enforcement. As tension escalates, French 75 member Deandra rescues Willa just before her school dance is violently raided. A moment that shatters any illusion of safety Bob had left. At home, Bob is warned about Lockjaw's approach, but the warning comes too late. His house is raided, forcing him to escape through a hidden tunnel. Desperate and panicking, Bob tries to contact the resistance from a payphone, only to realize he can't remember the greeting code. A small but devastating symbol of how far removed he has become from the cause he once lived for. Sergio San Carlos, Willa's karate sensei and a respected community leader, steps in to help, guiding evacuations through hidden passages as chaos erupts. While fleeing across rooftops with Sergio's students, Bob falls and is arrested, powerless once again. Deandra manages to get Willa to a convent run by revolutionary nuns, where she's finally told the truth about her mother's betrayal. This revelation hits hard, forcing Willa to confront the reality behind the myths she's been raised on. From the moment Willa learns the truth about her mother at the convent, the movie's emotional temperature changes completely. Up until now, so much of what she believed about her life was built on half-truths and stories meant to protect her. But once the nuns lay it all out, the betrayal, the deals, the executions that followed, you can almost feel the ground shift beneath her. She isn't just angry, she looks hollowed out, like someone who suddenly realizes the story of her family is full of smoke and missing pages. The convent itself feels strange, almost like a relic of an older, quieter revolution, with walls covered in faded murals and women who've long since learned to live with the consequences of choices they used to feel righteous. While Willa is absorbing this, the world outside is getting louder and more dangerous. Lockjaw's enemies within the Christmas Adventurers Club discover proof of his relationship with Perfidia, the very thing he was trying to erase. This triggers a different hunt, not just for Willa now, but for Lockjaw himself. The club sends Tim Smith, a cold, efficient killer, to eliminate him. And the movie starts to weave together all these threads of pursuit in a way that feels claustrophobic. Lockjaw manages to track Willa down at the convent and has Deandra arrested, turning what should have been a refuge into another battleground. The scene where he confronts Willa is unsettling in a quiet way. There are no big speeches, just a DNA test performed almost casually in front of her, confirming she is his daughter. It's one of those moments where the film makes you sit with discomfort rather than release it, forcing you to watch this girl discover that the man destroying her life is literally part of her blood. While this is happening, Bob is still moving like a bruised ghost through the story. After Sergio helps him escape custody, there's this frantic stretch where Sergio's driving him toward the convent, talking fast, half coaching, half scolding him, and then shoving him out of the car once police begin to close in. Because sacrifice and improvisation have become second nature to everyone who lives in this shadow world. Bob, battered but stubborn, steals another car and pushes on toward Willa, his whole life narrowing to just getting to her in time. When he reaches the convent, he tries to shoot Lockjaw with Sergio's rifle, but the attempt fails. And it almost feels like the film is telling you that Bob has to face more than just a simple revenge shot. Nothing in this story is that clean. Lockjaw, adapting like he always does, hires Avanti Q again. This time, specifically to kill Willa. Avanti refuses because of her age, which adds a brief, flickering humanity to someone who lives in this violent economy of favors and contracts. But then he's ordered instead to deliver her to a far-right militia. At the same time, Tim, the emissary from the Christmas Adventurers Club, closes in on Lockjaw and finally confronts him. The encounter is sudden and brutal. Tim shoots Lockjaw in the face, sending his car crashing and leaving him presumed dead. Bob later stumbles upon the crash site while desperately searching for Willa, turning over the debris with shaking hands, trying to read any sign of what happened. Meanwhile, Willa is being transported by Avanti. Their scenes together are strangely calm in places, like two people caught between systems much bigger than themselves. Avanti ultimately has a change of heart and frees her, a decision that costs him his life when the militia opens fire. The shootout is chaotic, dusty, and loud, and Willa, shaken but focused, escapes in Avanti's car, with his pistol nearby like an unwanted inheritance. Tim begins tailing her almost immediately, and Bob is somewhere behind them both, driving like a man being pulled by gravity rather than wheels. The film turns into a tense, stripped-down chase, not flashy, just relentless. Willa uses her instincts and whatever scraps of revolutionary training she's absorbed from stories and people around her. luring Tim into a fatal crash by using a blind summit on the road. When he survives the crash long enough to crawl toward her, she doesn't shoot out of panic. She tests him. She demands the revolutionary countersign, and when he can't recite it, she shoots him dead. It's a chilling moment because it isn't wild or hysterical. It feels ritualistic, as if she's stepping fully into the violent legacy she never asked for. Bob arrives just after this, and the reunion is raw and messy. Willa points the gun at him too, demanding the same countersign, and Bob, shaking, pleads with words rather than posturing. He manages to break through, convincing her to lower the weapon, the two of them collapsing into a tearful embrace that feels less like resolution and more like a pause between storms. They drive away together, father and daughter finally united, but carrying everything they've been through like a weight that will never fully lift. Then the film twists the knife one more time by revealing that Lockjaw survived. His face is horribly scarred, his speech strained, but his willpower still intact. Like a monster that refuses to die simply because he hasn't finished his unfinished business. He seems to be welcomed into the Christmas Adventurers Club, suits and ritual smiles and old wood and whispers. But in reality it's an execution ceremony. He's gassed and then cremated, reduced to nothing by the very organization he served. A darkly ironic punishment that feels perfectly in line with the movie's view of power devouring its own. In the quiet epilogue that follows, Bob and Willa return home, both carrying fresh emotional scars. Bob gives Willa a letter from Perfidia, where her mother apologizes and talks about someday reuniting. Words that feel both tender and too late. There's no grand reconciliation, just a fragile attempt to understand the woman who shaped all of this. Willa then leaves for a protest in Oakland, and Bob, instead of trying to stop her, gives his blessing. It's not so much approval of danger, as it is recognition that she has to choose her own way, through the wreckage left for her. The movie doesn't end on triumph. It ends on movement, generational momentum. One more step forward into a world where ideology, love, betrayal, and survival are tangled together. You walk out of it feeling like the title, isn't exaggerating anything. Life really is just one battle after another for these characters. Sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, never truly finished. The film settles deeper into its uneasy rhythm as life in Bactoncross keeps moving, while danger quietly coils around it. You can feel that sense of being watched even when nothing is on screen. Bob, living under the name Ferguson, has created this strange balance between survival and paranoia. Every movement, every glance from a stranger, every car that pauses too long outside his worn-out house feels like a possible threat to him. The place looks half like a refuge, and half like a man already buried in his own exile. Weed smoke floats through rooms, piles of old newspapers, guns hidden not neatly but nervously, as if they were grabbed and shoved away without calm thought. Bob is not painted as heroic or impressive. He looks exhausted. His revolution scars aren't physical ones. They're the kind that changed how a person breathes. Willa, now older, exists like sunlight trapped in a house with boarded windows. She laughs with friends, dances when music plays, argues like any stubborn teenager. Yet there is always a shadow behind her eyes because she grew up with pieces of history missing. Her mother is a legend to her, a name wrapped in heroism that she only knows through Bob's curated stories. Anderson shows this in small moments. Willa staring at old posters of protests, doodling slogans in notebooks, wearing jackets full of patches she doesn't truly understand. She wants the world to be big and alive, while Bob wants it small and hidden. That tension between them doesn't explode dramatically. It simmers through conversations that feel too real. A slammed door, an eye roll, a soft apology, neither finishes. Meanwhile, Lockjaw operates in a different world entirely. His world is polished glass buildings, uniforms pressed too sharply, meetings where men laugh about cruelty like it's policy. He's climbed the ladder not through intelligence, but through willingness to do what others won't say aloud. The camera doesn't frame him as monstrous. It frames him as disturbingly calm. He talks about security, protection of borders, and threat assessment, but everything underneath is obsession and shame. The humiliation he experienced years ago is something he never let go of, rotting internally until it turned into fixation. His hatred isn't political, it is personal, fused with ego and desire. Every advancement in his career looks like armor, but is really camouflage for insecurity. This is where the movie shifts tone slightly. Instead of only chasing Pat's past, the story begins weaving forward momentum. Lockjaw learns about the French 75 distress signals moving again, and there's a flicker of fear in his eyes. Not fear of being killed, fear of being exposed. his relationship with Perfidia, his loss of control during that encounter, and the existence of Willa become liabilities in his carefully constructed identity. He moves like someone scrubbing hard at a stain that won't fade. The Christmas Adventurers Club comes further into view, not as a cartoonish secret society, but as something chillingly ordinary. Old money, quiet racism, rituals dressed in respectability, expensive rooms, paintings of conquerors, cigars smoked in rooms, where decisions affecting thousands are treated like dinner conversation. Their smiles never reach their eyes. When Lockjaw stands among them, trying to look equal, he also clearly appears like someone terrified of not belonging. Parallel to all this, the French 75 members who survived scatter slowly reconnect. They don't wear uniforms anymore. They run daycare centers, repair motorcycles, grow vegetables, teach yoga lives, built from what remained after the cause burned out. Anderson refuses to romanticize revolution. He treats it like something that leaves bone-deep fatigue. But when danger returns, these people don't hesitate. It's not ideology now, it's family. Willa's life starts feeling stranger right before anything obvious happens. A car she doesn't recognize driving past school twice. A teacher suddenly acting nervous and locking doors early. A phone call with static interrupting a joke between friends. She senses something shifting even without being told. Teenagers in Anderson's films are always perceptive in ways adults underestimate, and Willa fits that pattern. She knows her father is lying about more than a few things, and that knowledge sits quietly without rebellion. She wants answers rather than escape. Bob, on the other hand, spirals. His paranoia sharpens. He moves faster around the house, listening through walls that hold nothing. We watch him trying to remember codes, names, whispered processes from a life he abandoned years ago. He smokes because it slows the panic, even though it also blurs his thoughts. He talks to himself, not for comedy, but because he's afraid silence might break him. When he realizes Lockjaw is in motion, the film doesn't show big music or loud editing. Just Bob sitting down heavily like gravity doubled. The attack on Bactan Cross doesn't feel like flashy action either. It feels like a violation. Military vehicles blending into the city using immigration operations as a mask is portrayed with chilling realism. People who were just cooking dinner or locking bicycles suddenly find armed men stepping into their lives. Sirens wail not as background noise, but as something that eats oxygen from rooms. Anderson captures children crying, dogs barking without being calmed, small things falling from shelves during forced entry. Chaos doesn't arrive clean. Through all this, Sergio Willa's karate instructor becomes unexpectedly important. He embodies peace and discipline, yet adapts when violence shows up at his doorstep. He doesn't posture, doesn't pretend to be a savior. He simply reacts, guiding people through hidden routes he clearly prepared long ago for scenarios like this. Bob, stumbling through fear while trying to do the right thing, leans on Sergio's clarity without ever formally admitting it. There's a wordless respect between them, built purely through situation. The payoff of Bob forgetting the greeting code is both darkly funny and deeply sad. A man who once moved through underground networks, like second nature, stands there frozen, mind blank, while everything depends on memory. His aging heart, weed-clouded head, years of isolation, it all crashes into that single failure. You feel compassion rather than mockery. Someone ends up helping him complete the connection, and it feels less like a slick spy moment, and more like community, refusing to abandon its broken members. At the same time, Willow is ripped out of her ordinary teenage world. The dance she looked forward to, the friends she joked with, the small life she built at school, all of it shatters instantly when DeAndre pulls her away, moments before soldiers flood the place. Bright lights, loud boots, crying students in formal clothes. Anderson plays this not for spectacle, but heartbreak, a transition from youth to danger in a single evening. Willa doesn't scream dramatically. She just clenches her jaw and absorbs reality at a speed no one her age should. Bob's arrest sequence lands differently. He doesn't fight like an action hero because the film refuses to pretend fantasy. He runs, trips, scrapes, breathes too hard. When he is caught, there isn't triumph in the officers' faces, only procedural. Watching him behind bars, head in his hands, you see not just fear for himself, but guilt about Willa. He blames his past, his choices, his lies, and also Perfidia. Yet despite all that exhaustion, the love for his daughter sits like fire that won't go out. Meanwhile, Lockjaw closes in on Willa, not like a traditional hunter, but almost like a ghost from a decision made decades ago. Every step he takes toward her feels wrong, even to him. There is disgust, desire, pride, fear, all mixed in a way he cannot articulate. He doesn't view her as a child initially. He views her as evidence. That's the disturbing truth Anderson conveys without sermons. The convent refuge isn't treated as holy sanctuary, but as another place full of human contradictions. Revolutionary nuns, stern and compassionate at once, reveal truths Willa never heard. She learns about her mother not as hero myths but as flawed, reckless, dangerous, and brave in ways that hurt people. That realization doesn't make her reject Perfidia. It simply forces her to see adulthood sooner. Bob's escape, arranged through Sergio, shows human loyalty rather than slick planning. Someone helps him not because he's special, but because communities help frightened fathers trying to reach their children. Bob stumbling through streets after being thrown from a moving vehicle matches the film Stone. Nothing smooth, everything bruised. Lockjaw confronting Willa with DNA testing becomes one of those disturbing scenes that stays in your head. It isn't loud, just unbearably intimate in the worst way. A girl barely prepared for life, suddenly forced to face biological truth tied to violence and betrayal. Willa's face doesn't break inwardly, it hardens. And somewhere in the distance, the battle lines from old ideologies curl back toward present lives again. Not because anyone wanted another fight, but because unresolved history always finds a way forward. The sun hangs low over the wide Texas sky, washing everything in a harsh golden light that makes dust glow like smoke. Toby drives with tense hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead while Tanner leans back, chewing gum, acting like the world is still a joke put here for him to irritate. Silence sits in the car again, not peaceful, just loaded. The road stretches like a long question neither of them wants to answer. Tanner suddenly smirks. "Admit it," he says, tapping the dashboard. "You're getting good at this." Toby shakes his head. "I'm not proud of anything we're doing." "That's your problem," Tanner replies, half laughing. "You think life is supposed to give out trophies." They stop at another rundown diner. The kind where cracked vinyl booths look like they've watched entire lifetimes happen, and the waitress moves like she has seen too much to be surprised anymore. The TV in the corner whispers news about bank robberies in West Texas. No one reacts much. Folks here are used to trouble. The only time heads lift is when talk turns to banks foreclosing on land, and then the mood changes, like someone opened a door and let cold wind in. A tired rancher mutters, "Bank took my place last year." Another man nods, jaw tight. "They're worse than thieves." Tobin listens without speaking. Every word lands heavy. He realizes something: he and Tanner are not the only ones fighting something invisible. Everyone here is bruised by the same system. That knowledge doesn't make him feel heroic. It just confirms that desperation is contagious. Meanwhile, Marcus and Alberto follow dusty roads across small towns with faded signs. Marcus keeps tossing casual jokes at his partner, pretending nothing weighs on him, but every clue sharpens his focus. He notices a pattern: only small branches of the same bank, early mornings, small cash, nothing traceable. It isn't random. It isn't hot-headed. It is careful, methodical, built on thought rather than rage. That realization changes something inside him. He stops treating this like a chase and starts treating it like a chess match. The brothers reach another small-town bank. The parking lot is still, morning quiet hanging over it. Toby hesitates, fear washing through him for a split second. His life up to now has been defined by working hard and losing anyway. This new path scares him because it feels like a line you don't cross back over once you step past it. Tanner, however, walks inside with the swagger of someone who burnt that line years before. The robbery moves fast, tense voices, shaking hands, frightened eyes. A woman near the counter trembles while clutching her purse. Toby notices and softens his voice, telling her, "It'll be all right. No one's getting hurt." He means it. Violence is a boundary he refuses to cross, even while crossing every other one he thought he never would. As they leave, Tanner laughs, as though the world finally gave him something to feel alive about. Toby doesn't laugh. He stares at the road, seeing only his sons, his mother's empty house, and land that will disappear if he stops now. The Rangers arrive minutes later, long after the dust has swallowed the brothers' car. Marcus studies the terrified teller and the scuffed floor, then walks outside, hands on his hips, eyes narrowing at the horizon. He doesn't see the brothers, but he feels them out there, stubborn, reckless, careful in strange ways. He realizes they aren't running toward glory or chaos. They're running toward something that matters to them more than consequences. That makes them dangerous. The chase no longer feels like law against crime. It feels like two stories accelerating toward each other across a sun-beaten landscape, neither side willing to swerve first. Marcus tells Alberto quietly. They're not fools. They're desperate. Alberto replies. Desperate men can be the most foolish of all. Marcus nods slowly, eyes hard. Or the most committed. The land rolls on for miles, wind pushing through dry grass, fences leaning like they're tired of standing guard. Somewhere along that lonely stretch of highway, two brothers keep driving, not looking back, because looking back means stopping, and stopping means losing everything they have left to fight for. Wind rushes across the empty plains, bending the tall grass in long waves that look like tired sighs from the land itself. Toby and Tana pull up outside an old gas station, the kind with faded advertisements peeling off the walls, and a single pump that clicks, like an S counting someone's last chances. The tires crunch over gravel, and everything feels suspended for a moment, the noise of the world held back by the wide Texas sky. Tana hops out first, always moving like he's allergic to stillness. He jokes with the clerk, buys snacks, acts like they're on an aimless road trip and not riding the edge of a knife. Toby stands by the pump, staring at the horizon, his reflection wavering in the dusty car window. He's thinking of mortgages, signatures, legal papers full of words that sound polite but feel like threats. He is thinking of his boys, and how he refuses to let them inherit the same losing battle he fought his whole life. Tana tosses a bag of chips at him. Eat, you look like guilt is starving you. Toby answers flatly, guilt's part of the deal. Tana shrugs. Then learn to live with it. Inside the ranger's car, Marcus rides in silence while Alberto watches the passing landscape. Fences stretch endlessly, circling land that looks free, but belongs to someone on paper. Marcus studies the terrain like it's talking to him, tracing invisible routes the brothers might have taken. Experience tells him something important. Thieves chasing thrills make noise, but thieves chasing a purpose move like ghosts. They stop at a small cafe full of weathered faces. Marcus walks in, hat tilted forward, eyes wandering without hurry, but missing nothing. He talks to locals, not like a cop pressuring witnesses, but like a man trading stories. Soon, he hears the same tone in every voice. Resentment toward banks, toward debts, toward losing land to paperwork instead of storms. That feeling sits under the conversations like a buried fire. A woman says, someone robs those banks. Can't say I'm crying over it. Marcus gives a faint smile, but his gaze hardens. Sympathy doesn't erase responsibility. It only explains it. Back on the road, Toby and Tana drive toward another branch. Quiet town, aging buildings, sunburnt Main Street. Toby's stomach tightens. Not fear for himself, but for the fragile rule he's clinging to. Nobody gets hurt. That's the line he refuses to cross no matter how far he goes. Tana doesn't have that same rule. For him, danger is a kind of fuel. They walk inside. People freeze. Tana's grin flashes like a spark thrown too close to dry grass. Toby keeps his voice steady, calm, trying to turn chaos into something controlled. He doesn't shout. He doesn't wave the gun wildly. He treats fear like something delicate, because he knows what it's like to live with it. Money slides into bags. The clock on the wall ticks loudly, like a judge counting sins. One man makes the mistake of stepping forward, anger overtaking judgment. Tana's expression changes instantly, wildness rising fast. Toby steps between them before anything irreversible happens, his hands steady but firm, his eyes saying more than words ever could. The moment passes, but it leaves a crack in the fragile peace they are trying to keep. Outside, the world looks normal again. Cars rolling by, wind stirring dust, sunlight pouring across empty fields. But everything has shifted, even if no one can see it yet. Marcus receives word of another hit. He doesn't react with surprise, only confirmation. The map in his head gains another pin, and the picture becomes clearer. Same bank, same style, same restrained violence. They aren't stealing to live wildly. They're building towards something, he mutters, almost to himself. They're working with a deadline. Alberto glances at him. You think so? Marcus nods slowly. Nobody moves with that kind of focus unless time is closing in on them. Evening light spills across the highway as the brothers drive again. Tana sings along to the radio badly, drumming on the steering wheel, joking about everything. Toby sits beside him, the weight of each choice stacking inside his chest like bricks. He doesn't say anything dramatic. He doesn't ask for absolution. He simply keeps going, because turning around now would make all the risk meaningless. The land around them stretches wide and lonely, full of abandoned houses, rusted tractors, sun-bleached signs, promising loans that turned into traps. It feels like the landscape itself understands why two brothers might decide to break the law, just to keep a piece of ground that carries their family's memory. Night approaches slowly, shadows reaching across the road like long fingers. Somewhere out there, two stories continue moving toward each other, the brothers fighting to save what little they have left, and the rangers driven to stop them not out of cruelty, but out of duty that will not bend. The stage is set for collisions no one can walk away from unchanged. Morning arrives without ceremony, just pale light creeping across the plains and sliding under motel curtains. Toby sits at the edge of the bed, boots planted on the carpet, elbows on his knees. He looks like a man carved out of worry. Tanner is sprawled on the other bed, snoring softly, completely free of the burden that keeps Toby awake. The difference between them is stark. One brother thinks first and bleeds later. The other charges forward and lets consequences chase him. Toby studies a photo of his sons, their faces full of uncomplicated youth. He rubs his thumb across the image like it's something fragile, something that might crumble if handled wrong. Every robbery, every risk, every sleepless hour ties back to that single picture. He is not searching for glory. He is not chasing excitement. He simply wants his boys to stand on land that belongs to them, not to a bank with smiling loan officers and sharp paperwork. Tanner wakes, stretches, and grins. You look like you're confessing to the furniture. Toby answers quietly, just thinking. Tanner replies, that's your problem. Thinking too much. You do the worrying, I do the doing. Works fine. They gear up again. Guns are checked, not with thrill, but with routine. The room door opens, letting in warm air thick with dust and gasoline smells. They step out like men walking onto a path they already know, leads into darkness, but they keep walking anyway. Across the state, Marcus sips bitter motel coffee, the kind that tastes like it holds grudges. He sits at the table with files spread around him. Notes scribbled with a handwriting that has chased criminals longer than half the faces in uniform today have been alive. Alberto watches him calmly, leaning back, understanding his partner's mind without needing words. Marcus points at a map dotted with banks. Look here. They're not greedy. They're careful. Small branches, low amounts, early hours. Alberto responds, avoiding die packs. Avoiding attention. Marcus adds, avoiding unnecessary violence. Except that one brother doesn't know what the word unnecessary means. He has the shape of them now. One quiet strategist. One reckless storm. He doesn't see villains. Only people who chose the wrong road for reasons they think are right. That doesn't soften his resolve. It just sharpens his understanding. Back on the open highway, the brothers drive past endless stretches of empty land. Oil pumps rise and fall like slow mechanical beasts feeding from the earth. Toby glances at them, seeing not machines, but possibility the future income that will save his family if he can just hold everything together long enough. They reach another small town. Same tired storefronts. Same courthouse that looks too big for the people living there. Same bank. Clean windows. Polite posters promising help that never actually helped anyone like the Howards. Toby's jaw tightens. Tanner's eyes light up with that dangerous spark that never quite turns off. Inside, whispers ripple through the lobby as soon as masks appear. People freeze. Fear thickens the air. Toby's voice remains calm, low, controlled. He speaks like a man giving instructions during a storm, determined not to let panic turn into tragedy. Tanner moves faster, sharper, scanning for threats, adrenaline pushing him toward the edge. Cash fills the bags again. It's routine by now, but the tension feels heavier each time. Toby senses it, the way luck stretches thinner, the way fate starts paying closer attention when people tempt it too often. They exit to blinding sunlight. The quiet street suddenly feels watchful, as if every window holds a pair of eyes. They move quickly to the car, wheels rolling over the pavement, the engine absorbing their urgency. Marcus gets the call, within minutes. Another bank. Same patterns. Same ghosts, moving through towns and leaving behind shaken silence. His expression doesn't change, but something inside him settles. The hunt is no longer wide and uncertain. It's narrowing. He and Alberto head out, siren off, moving with patience rather than speed. Marcus doesn't believe in crashing into situations blindly. He knows the most dangerous people are not the loud ones. They are the ones who carry sadness like armor and feel they've already lost too much to step back. The sun climbs high, turning the land into a shimmering expanse of heat and dust trails behind the brothers' car like a ribbon marking their path across the wilderness. Toby keeps glancing at Tanner, wondering how much longer his brother can outrun the part of himself that wants chaos. Tanner hums, laughs, talks about everything except fear. He has always been like this fire that refuses to admit it, can burn out, They bury another car in an isolated patch of land. Shovels bite into dirt with dull, heavy sounds. Sweat runs down their faces, mixing with dust until they look like figures molded out of the landscape itself. There is no romance in this work. It's hard, ugly, necessary. Toby pauses, leaning on the shovel, breathing hard. Tanner pats him on the back. Almost there. Toby replies, not yet. Tanner grins. Close enough to taste. Those words echo in Toby's head. Close enough can mean salvation. It can also mean disaster. Far away, Marcus stands outside his cruiser, looking across a wide valley filled with silence. He feels the story pushing toward an unseen point, like two rivers moving toward the same canyon. He rests his hands on his belt, not as a show of authority, but as a habit formed over years of standing in places just like this, where something irreversible waits ahead. The land remains quiet. The wind carries dust across the road. Somewhere on that same stretch of earth, two brothers keep chasing a future, and two rangers keep following the trail, all of them bound to collide, because none of them are willing to stop. The road seems endless. Mile after mile of sunburned fields stretch toward the horizon, and the sky feels too wide for the small, tired towns scattered beneath it. Toby drives with both hands tight on the wheel, staring straight ahead, as if focus alone might bend the world into something kinder. Tanner reclines in the passenger seat, boots on the dashboard, sunglasses hiding whatever emotion might pass through his eyes. A radio plays low country music, the kind that sounds like dust and regret. Tanner taps his finger along with the rhythm. You know what I miss? He asks casually. Noise, casinos, bars, something that isn't empty land and worried silence. Toby doesn't react. Tanner laughs softly. You think too loud, little brother? I can hear it over the radio. Silence takes over again. But it isn't empty. It carries everything they've been avoiding saying. Toby thinks of the house that doesn't feel like home anymore. The long illness that hollowed their mother out piece by piece. The bank letters written in polite fonts that somehow felt crueler than shouting. He remembers sitting at a kitchen table with debts stacked like a second set of dishes, realizing nothing honest was ever going to save the land he grew up on. Somewhere deep inside him, he knows they crossed a line. He also knows that line never offered mercy anyway. Marcus and Alberto drive through another small town. Their cruiser rolling past shuttered gas stations and fading billboards promising opportunities that never arrived. Marcus studies faces, the way people walk, the way they look at strangers. Rural areas keep secrets differently. Instead of whispers, they hold them in long, quiet stares. They stop at a diner. The waitress recognizes the badges before plates touch the table. People have already been talking banks hit, rumors spreading faster than cars can travel. Marcus listens without pressing, letting casual conversation reveal more than interrogation ever could. They weren't mean, the waitress says, pouring coffee. Scared as sure, but the quiet one seems sad. Marcus nods slowly. That single word sad lines up perfectly with the picture in his mind. Two brothers, one fire, one storm cloud. Back on the highway, the brothers pull over near a lonely patch of land where mesquite trees twist against the wind. Toby stands outside the car, hands on his hips, staring across acres that look both beautiful and unforgiving. Tanner joins him, squinting into the sunlight. This is what they'll have, Toby says, meaning his sons, meaning the future. Tanner answers without jokes this time. Then it's worth every bullet someone points at us. He means it. That loyalty runs deeper than his recklessness. Tanner is chaos wrapped around fierce devotion. The kind of man who laughs at danger, but will step in front of it if it means someone he loves walks away safer. They move again, toward another town with another clean, well-lit bank that calls itself a community institution, while quietly taking away the very communities it claims to support. Toby walks through the doors, with controlled calm, voice steady, motions precise. Tanner watches angles, exits, the twitch of every hand in the lobby. The teller hands over cash with trembling fingers. Toby avoids eye contact not out of cruelty, but out of shame he doesn't want to admit even to himself. He doesn't hate these people. He hates the structure wrapped around all of them, the one that traps ordinary lives in paperwork and penalties. Outside, tires scream against asphalt. A truck across the street is filled with men who look like they were waiting their whole lives to feel like heroes. They're armed, angry, and proud of it. Toby's heart jumps. Tanner's grin appears, sharp and reckless, like lightning deciding where to strike. The car surges forward. Gunshots echo through the open air, loud and raw. Toby grips the wheel. Tanner leans out the window, answering fire with frightening confidence. Bullets kick dirt, crack glass, tear through metal. This stopped being clean the moment ego and firearms entered the equation. Somewhere far from gunpowder, Marcus hears the radio call. His shoulders lift slightly, like a man recognizing a familiar tune. He doesn't celebrate the chase. He simply accepts it. Years of experience tell him the story has reached a point where nobody walks away unchanged. He and Alberto speed toward the location, not with sirens screaming, but with grim purpose. Roads peel away beneath the cruiser. Dust rises behind them, erased immediately by more road ahead. Alberto glances at Marcus and sees not excitement, but a quiet understanding of what violence does to everyone it touches. The brothers escape the gun-waving locals, but the cost shows on Toby's face. A mark of exhaustion settles there, deeper than lack of sleep. Tanner acts untouched, still joking, still flicking invisible ash off his sleeve like nothing matters beyond the next mile. They ditch another car, shovels scraping dry earth. The hole fills again, burying metal like a secret the landscape agrees to keep. The sun leans downward, but the heat clings stubbornly to everything, draped over them like a heavy blanket they can't shake off. Toby sits on the ground for a moment, breathing steadily, staring into the dirt. Tanner sits beside him, elbows on knees. For once, neither speaks. They just exist in the same silence, weighed down by everything unsaid, everything done, everything still ahead. At a gas station later, Toby watches families walk in and out, kids arguing over snacks, parents counting pennies at the counter. He sees himself in them, tired, stretched thin, trying to keep things together without showing the strain. Tanner buys beer, smiles at the clerk, flirts just enough to leave laughter behind, instead of fear. Two sides of the same coin walk out the door together. Marcus and Alberto arrive in that same town not long afterward. Marcus stands outside the cruiser, reading tire marks, reading glances from locals, reading the unspoken sentence in the air, "You just missed them." He tilts his hat, lets out a slow breath, and keeps moving. He doesn't rush. He doesn't need to. He knows desperation circles back on itself. Sooner or later, pressure pushes people into places they cannot maneuver out of, and that is where decisions reveal who they truly are. Night spreads across the land like spilled ink, swallowing color, leaving outlines and headlights. The brothers find another cheap motel. Another plain room with rattling air conditioning and stiff beds. Tanner drops onto the mattress like gravity doubled just for him. Toby stands at the window, staring out at darkness that looks almost alive. He sees everything at once, his sons laughing, the ranch stretching beneath clear blue sky, oil pumps moving like patient metronomes of fortune, Tanner's reckless smile, bank vault doors, gun barrels, empty roads. It feels like holding two futures in his hands and knowing only one can stay. Tanner's voice drifts through the room, quieter than usual. "You're carrying the whole world like luggage. Put it down for a minute," Toby answers without turning. "Can't." Tanner nods, even though Toby can't see it. Some part of him understands perfectly the weight, the purpose, the love buried under every wrong step. Sleep arrives slowly. Trucks roar past outside. Neon flickers. Somewhere out in the vast darkness, rangers sit awake, brothers sit awake, bank managers sit awake, debt sits awake. The land holds all of it like a huge, silent witness, offering no comfort, only space. The desert stretches endlessly under a bruised sky. Stars poke through the darkness, sparse and sharp, as if impatient to witness what comes next. Toby drives the car slowly along a cracked highway, the engine thrumming low and steady, a heartbeat against the emptiness. Tanner leans forward in the passenger seat, scanning every shadow, listening for movement. Any sign that the world has caught up to them. His grin is there, faint, more a reflex than amusement. Danger has become routine, almost comforting. The motel from the night before fades behind them, neon buzzing like an unspoken warning. Every mile they put between themselves and towns, banks, and prying eyes feels like progress. Yet neither brother knows how far enough actually is. Toby's mind drifts, turning over the ledger of debts, oil leases, and the bills waiting to strangle the ranch. Every calculation, every plan, collides with a simple truth. They are fugitives now. Every exit sign they pass, every gas station stop, every diner smells of decisions that could mean life or death. Meanwhile, Marcus and Alberto push through the night, with the discipline of men who have seen too much to panic. Marcus keeps his eyes on the road ahead, ears tuned to chatter on the police frequencies, noting small details that would escape anyone else. Tire tracks, dust patterns, the silhouette of a lone pickup, Each piece is a puzzle he is piecing together silently. Alberto calls in sightings from the edges of towns, whispering into the radio as Marcus listens, nods, and files everything into the mental map forming behind his eyes. Back on the highway, the brothers pull off at a secluded truck stop, empty except for the faint hum of refrigeration units and a single security camera blinking lazily. Toby checks the money again, counting silently, organizing stacks into neat bundles that feel simultaneously heavy and meaningless. Tanner moves outside, stretching, letting the night air wash over him. There's a kind of fragile peace here, the kind that comes from knowing no one is pointing a gun at your back for the moment. They eat cold sandwiches from a paper bag, the bread stiff, the meat dry. They talk, a little, about nothing. Whether towns they passed, how far it is to the next service station. Words are sparse, but enough to remind them they are alive. Tanner's laugh cuts briefly across the quiet, sharper than usual. Toby doesn't respond. He is already calculating the next move, plotting the route that keeps them both safe and inches them closer to a ranch that might be theirs once again. The sound of engines in the distance makes him stiffen. Toby freezes, eyes narrowing. Tanner follows his gaze, hand hovering near the glove compartment where a weapon rests. Trucks pass, some hauling empty trailers, some loaded. The world has not noticed them yet, but it is waking up, stretching its arms, coming alive with people who want to claim justice, revenge, or merely control. Across the desert, Marcus and Alberto coordinate with local deputies. Marcus moves quietly, deliberately, his calm, the kind that unnerves people around him. Every report, every signal, is integrated into a single vision. The brothers will make mistakes. They always do. The question is how big those mistakes will be, and whether they will survive them. Toby checks the map again, tracing fingers over faded lines, searching for a route that avoids main highways and known law enforcement checkpoints. Tanner, restless, taps on the dashboard, glances at the desert around them. His mind races faster than Toby's. In his imagination, the chase is already over. The brothers are already safe. But real life never bends to imagination. Hours pass in this rhythm, the hum of the car, the occasional flicker of headlights in the distance, the distant howls of coyotes. Every sound could be a threat, every shadow a hunter waiting to pounce. They stop at a small, abandoned diner, empty except for the ghosts of past travelers. Inside, they wash faces at a chipped sink, sip tepid coffee, and plan in whispers. Each plan folds into another, contingency layered upon contingency. The morning brings heat, relentless and sharp. Sun slices across the highway, melting asphalt and shadows alike. Tobin drives with his sleeve pulled low over his forearm, sweat dampening the cloth. Tanner rides shotgun, scanning the horizon, eyes shaded under the brim of his hat. They are alert, tuned to the rhythm of the world in a way that only fugitives can be. News reports flicker through a small, dusty TV in the diner. Another bank robbery. A suspect description that fits them. Authorities baffled by the precision, the audacity. Tanner laughs softly at the absurdity. They're making heroes out of us, he says. Toby doesn't answer, but the thought drifts through his mind. Heroes or villains, what difference does it make when survival is all that matters? Marcus sits in a cruiser on the edge of town, listening, reading. He knows the patterns now. He understands the brothers, not in the sentimental sense, but in a functional one. One acts with reckless flair, the other with careful, deliberate logic. He knows the next step, can predict the choices they will make, and the consequences that follow. By midday, Toby makes a decision. A new route, one that cuts across private land, risky but faster. Tanner hesitates, then grins. You always pick the long, boring road. Finally, some action. Toby doesn't smile. They move together, a single unit, navigating the terrain with the precision of men who know every second counts. And behind them, the shadow of pursuit grows. Marcus and Alberto are relentless, their minds calculating every possible error, every human flaw, every opportunity. The game is not fair, and neither is the land. But it will tell them truthfully who is clever, who is desperate, who survives. Night approaches again. The brothers pull into a small, deserted valley, headlights cutting through dust and rocks. Tanner steps out, stretches, kicks at loose gravel. Toby stays inside, eyes scanning, mind turning over the possibilities. The dangers, the small victories, the heavy losses that always seem to come together. Somewhere far beyond, Marcus coordinates with deputies, drawing invisible lines between towns, highways, and the landscape of inevitability. Every mile, every decision, every heartbeat matters. The chase isn't over, not yet. And both sides know it, not in words, but in the quiet understanding that drives every movement, every choice, every fleeting glance over his shoulder. The wind picks up in the valley, carrying dust and the faint scent of sagebrush. Tanner shifts uneasily, his fingers brushing the side of the pickup, listening for sounds that aren't there. Toby remains behind the wheel, knuckles white, eyes scanning the horizon where shadows shift like restless spirits. The quiet is deceptive. Every desert valley holds a secret. Every ridge could hide eyes, and every turn could bring the law crashing down. Tanner cracks a small joke, voice low and rough. Toby doesn't respond, focused instead on tracing the route in his mind, comparing it to maps and markings from previous robberies. His calculations are meticulous. Where to speed, where to slow, where to hide. Tanner leans back, watching the skies streak red with the dying sun, thinking of nothing and everything, letting the heat and tension wrap around him like a second skin. Miles away, Marcus and Alberto move with clinical precision. Vehicles fan out, roads blocked, checkpoints manned. Every movement is deliberate, calculated. Marcus has studied every known route, every dirt road, every culvert, every landmark. The brothers are smart, yes, but desperation makes people sloppy. Alberto calls in minor sightings. A car matching the brothers' description. Dust clouds on a back road. A glimpse of movement through sparse trees. Marcus notes everything. Every detail is a thread. Together, they weave the pattern that will trap them. Back in the valley, Toby pulls off the main dirt track and onto a narrower path, barely wide enough for the pickup. Rocks shift under tires, the engine groaning with effort. Tanner leans forward, watching a tumbleweed spin across the path. Feels like a trap, he mutters. Toby shakes his head. It's a shortcut. We can't keep running main roads forever. He adjusts the wheel carefully, eyes sharp, ears tuned to every sound. The distant call of a coyote. The rattle of loose metal under the truck bed. The occasional bird taking off in panic. Hours pass with this tense rhythm. The sun dipping behind mountains, shadows stretching like fingers across the sand. They stop briefly near a dry creek bed, pulling the truck into shade behind boulders. Tanner steps out, taking deep breaths, scanning the horizon. How many miles do you think we have before they catch up? He asks. Toby doesn't answer. Numbers, times, distances swirl in his mind, but saying them aloud would make them real, irrevocable. Meanwhile, Marcus intercepts a local trucker on a back road. Carefully, quietly, he extracts information about vehicles seen in the area matching the brothers' description. Every detail is a puzzle piece. The make, the color, the timing. He files it all silently, integrating it into the larger plan. Alberto watches traffic cameras remotely, noting patterns, every movement feeding their hunt. They move like predators who know the desert better than anyone running through it. Night falls fully, and the temperature drops sharply. Toby drives slowly, careful of every rock and ridge. Tanner leans back, eyes closed briefly, tension slowly leaking from his shoulders. In the darkness, the outline of a small abandoned farmhouse appears. Toby nods slightly. We stop there, he says. Tanner grins faintly, a glimmer of relief, or perhaps excitement. They park behind the crumbling structure, careful to keep shadows long and quiet. Inside, dust motes float in streaks of moonlight. Old furniture lies scattered, broken, like a skeleton of a lifelong past. Toby counts the stacks of money again, methodically. Tanner lights a small lantern, casting flickering shadows on the walls, the uneven light making every corner a potential hiding place. Silence stretches between them, not uncomfortable, but loaded with tension, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The distant sound of engines breaks the fragile peace. Tanner freezes, hand hovering near the trucker's rifle in the corner. Toby stands quickly, moving to the broken window, peering into the darkness. Faint headlights flicker in the distance, and the brothers instinctively flatten against the floor, hearts hammering. Every muscle is coiled, every breath measured. Marcus and Alberto are close now. Marcus crouches behind a ridge, binoculars trained on the farmhouse. They're here, he murmurs. Do not engage yet. Wait for the right moment. Alberto nods silently, tension radiating in his posture. Every decision could tip the scales between capture and escape. Inside, the brothers hold their breath as the dissonant vehicle grows closer. Tanner whispers something, a nervous joke, trying to break the tension. Toby doesn't respond, focused entirely on timing, angle, and survival. The night hums with danger. the desert listening, the stars witnessing the quiet, inevitable collision. Minutes stretch into eternity. Dusk kicks up outside, shadows shift with the headlights, and the anticipation becomes almost unbearable. Every movement outside is magnified, every sound amplified. The brothers exchange a quick glance, silent acknowledgement. Whatever happens next will define everything. The desert, relentless and unforgiving, waits with them. The headlights fade slightly as the pursuing vehicles slow, circling the valley with deliberate patience. Toby crouches behind the wooden beams of the farmhouse, eyes narrowing through a crack in the boards. Every sound outside, the creak of tires over rocks, the whisper of wind across dry earth, feels like a thunderclap. Tanner's breathing is uneven, sharp and shallow, betraying nerves he's otherwise hidden beneath bravado. Toby leans close, whispering, "Stay calm, follow my lead. We'll move when the timing is right." Tanner nods, though his fingers twitch, brushing against the butt of the rifle leaning against the wall. The night air carries tension so thick it could be sliced with a knife, each second stretching and twisting as though the desert itself were holding its breath. Outside, Marcus signals to Alberto, who positions the vehicles to cut off any escape routes. They know the farmhouse is a temporary sanctuary, and they intend to turn it into a trap. Marcus checks his watch, timing every movement with precision. "They're not leaving without a fight," he murmurs, "and we'll be ready." Inside, the brothers pack and prepare silently. Toby counts the money for the last time, carefully folding it into waterproof bags, his mind racing with strategies, possible exits, and contingencies. Tanner, meanwhile, moves with an anxious energy, scanning windows, testing doors, listening for the slightest disturbance. Every crick of the farmhouse floorboards sends a jolt through him. A sudden noise outside, metal scraping against stone, makes both men freeze. Toby signals for silence, pressing a finger to his lips. They hear the distant murmur of voices, the occasional bark of a dog. The wind carries snippets of conversation, a name, a number, a vehicle description. Every detail is a potential clue for the hunters. But Toby absorbs it all, using it to anticipate their moves. Minutes later, Toby and Tanner slip quietly through a back exit, moving like shadows over uneven ground, their figures blending with the desert night. The headlights sweep past the house, unaware of the escape, and the brothers vanish into the jagged terrain. Dust rises faintly beneath their feet, marking a trail that only the observant might follow. Marcus notices the movement instantly. "There!" he shouts, pointing. Alberto fires a single flare, illuminating the rocky hillside. The brothers freeze momentarily, calculating their next move. Toby adjusts their path, ducking into a narrow canyon, knowing the terrain is their ally. Tanner follows, grinning despite the fear, adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. The canyon twists sharply, walls closing in, forcing the vehicles to slow. Toby takes advantage, leading Tanner up a ridge that grants a panoramic view of the pursuing forces. From this height, the desert seems endless, an ocean of shadow and rock. Toby signals a halt. "We need to split up," he says. "You take the east path. I'll take west. Regroup at the old mining site in 3 hours." Tanner hesitates, but nods, understanding the stakes. The split is instantaneous, each brother vanishing in opposite directions, dust and shadow masking their movements. Marcus curses softly, recognizing the strategy. He had expected flight, but not the clever division. Alberto scrambles to adjust, directing his men to cover multiple potential escape routes. The night echoes with the distant hum of engines, shouts, and the crunch of gravel under tires. Toby presses forward, navigating the western ridge with careful precision. Every rock and ledge becomes a potential hazard or advantage, every shadow a possible observer. Tanner, meanwhile, takes the eastern path, darting between boulders, the faint moonlight reflecting off his eyes, wild and alert. They move like phantoms, driven by desperation and an intimate knowledge of the terrain. Hours pass, tension unrelenting, until both brothers, exhausted but determined, reach a hidden cave at the edge of the ridge. Inside, it's cool and silent, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. They regroup, sharing minimal words. The map sprawled between them shows their route, a series of ridges, hidden paths, and abandoned tracks leading toward a safe house, deep in the desert. "We're not out of this yet," Toby mutters, checking their remaining supplies. Tanner nods, wiping sweat and dust from his face. "But we're still in it," he replies, a hint of grim humor breaking through the tension. The night outside continues to hum with pursuit. The headlights sweep across ridges and canyons, but the brothers have gained precious distance. For now, The desert is their ally. Every rock and shadow a shield, every twist in the terrain a new chance. Yet, they know the hunters are relentless. Marcus and Alberto will not relent until the chase ends, and the stakes grow higher with every heartbeat. Inside the cave, the brothers rest briefly, breathing heavily, eyes alert. The desert stretches endlessly beyond, a world of danger, strategy, and survival. Every decision, every movement, carries consequences that could be fatal. For Toby and Tana, the night is far from over, and the chase has only just escalated. The desert sun begins to lift the horizon, pale gold bleeding into the endless blue, casting long, jagged shadows across the ridges. Toby and Tanner have managed to stay ahead of Marcus and Alberto, but exhaustion etches deep lines on their faces. Every step crunches against the sun-baked soil, every breath draws grit into their lungs. They pause atop a ridge to survey the valley below, the landscape sprawling like a living maze. Tanner crouches beside Toby, wiping sweat and dust from his forehead. "We're getting nowhere fast, if they've got eyes on every ridge," he mutters, scanning the movements of the patrol vehicles far below. His hands tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the raw adrenaline that has been coursing through him for hours. Toby studies the valley quietly, mind-mapping potential escape routes. "We split again," he says finally. "You take the northern ridge, circle around to the abandoned train yard. I'll take the southern path and meet you at the old mill. Timing has to be exact." Tanner blinks, considering the risk. "And if they catch us in the split," Toby doesn't flinch, "then we make them regret it." The brothers separate silently, each moving along the rough terrain with calculated steps. Toby keeps low, using the natural cover of rocks and brush. Every rustle of a lizard or crack of a stone makes his pulse spike. Marcus watches from above in the pursuit vehicles, noting the split, gesturing to Alberto, who redirects a section of the team to cut off the north. Meanwhile, Tanner moves through the northern ridge, darting between shadows, pausing occasionally to listen for the faint hum of engines or voices. Dust rises in clouds behind him, betraying movement, but he keeps to the rockier, more treacherous paths, using the terrain to his advantage. He reaches the abandoned train yard, a skeletal reminder of industry long gone. Rusted tracks twisting like arteries across the sand. Toby, taking the southern route, navigates a dried riverbed, where water once carved a path through the desert. The ground is uneven, strewn with jagged stones that threaten every step. He moves with deliberate caution, aware that a single misstep could draw attention from above, or give away his position. The mill looms ahead in the distancy relic of a forgotten era, its silhouette jagged against the dawn. Marcus becomes impatient, sensing the brothers slipping through his fingers. "They're not just running, they're planning," he mutters. Alberto nods, eyes scanning the horizon for movement. "We've underestimated them," he admits. The vehicles fan out, some taking higher ground to get a better line of sight, others attempting to block the valleys. Inside the train yard, Tanner pauses, crouched behind a stack of rusted freight containers. The air smells of old metal and dust, oppressive under the heat of the rising sun. He checks his watch, counting the minutes to synchronize with Toby. Every sound a distant bird, the whisper of wind feels amplified, like the world itself is holding its breath in anticipation. Back at the southern ridge, Toby takes a moment to steady his breathing. The canyon walls provide natural cover, but his mind races with contingency plans. He knows Marcus and Alberto are relentless, their strategy methodical. Every second counts. Every decision could tip the balance between freedom and capture. The first shots echo across the valley, not from the brothers, but from an encounter below where a scouting party of Marcos' team has stumbled across a minor ambush set by the brothers earlier. Smoke rises faintly in the distance, and Toby and Tanner know that they've bought precious time, but not much. The window for regrouping is closing fast. Tanner navigates through the twisted metal and gravel of the train yard, finding a hidden tunnel beneath a platform. He moves cautiously, aware that Marcus's men could be anywhere. Above, dust swirls, the morning sun glinting off helmets and vehicles as the pursuit intensifies. Toby reaches the mill, taking cover behind a stack of old crates. He peers across the desert expanse, searching for the northern ridge, searching for Tanner. Communication is limited, gestures subtle, and every movement could give away his position. The vast, empty landscape feels like a stage for a deadly game of chess. Hours drag, each moment a mix of strategy, survival, and fear. Both brothers know that the chase is far from over, that Marcus and Alberto will exploit every misstep. Yet, they press on, using ingenuity, terrain, and grit to stay one step ahead. As the sun rises higher, The desert seems to shimmer with heat and anticipation. Toby and Tana, separated but connected by strategy, continue their perilous dance, moving closer toward their rendezvous points, aware that every heartbeat, every shadow, and every decision could determine the outcome of the relentless pursuit. The afternoon sun beats down on the desert, turning the terrain into a shimmering mirage of heat and tension. Tobin moves cautiously through the remnants of the old mill, using the shadows to mask his presence. Each creaking floorboard beneath his boots sends shivers of alertness through his body. He knows Marcus and Alberto are scanning the horizon relentlessly, their eyes like hawks, tracking any flicker of movement. Tana, deep within the abandoned train yard tunnel, follows a narrow passageway, the walls lined with dust and rust. Every footstep echoes in the confined space, amplified as though the tunnels themselves are listening. His hands trace the rough walls for guidance, careful not to disturb the loose stones that could reveal his location. The air is heavy and stagnant, filled with the metallic temps of rust and sand. Above ground, Marcus and Alberto coordinate with precision. They split their teams, some ascending higher ridges to create overlapping lines of sight, while others descend into canyons and valleys, attempting to predict the brothers' next move. Marcus pauses atop a rock formation, binoculars in hand, scanning every ridge and crevice. "They're smarter than we anticipated," he mutters, his voice low, a mix of frustration and admiration. "But they're still human." Alberto nods, jaw tight, as he relays commands to the units below. Toby finally spots the faint outline of Tana's figure moving across a distant ridge, shielded partially by the heat waves rising from the desert floor. He signals subtly, hoping Tana notices. The timing is crucial. The plan relies on precise coordination. One false step could trigger the end of their escape. Toby takes a deep breath, listening to the hum of the desert, the whispers of the wind carrying the faint sounds of distant engines. Tana pauses mid-tunnel, sensing a faint vibration through the ground. Footsteps, voices. He freezes, pressing himself against the cold, rough wall. Shadows flicker as searchlights sweep the perimeter above, the metallic clatter of boots echoing down the tunnels. Tana's pulse races, but he forces himself to stay calm. He knows that patience is as vital as speed. Outside, a sudden dust cloud signals an encounter further south, drawing Toby's attention. A group of Marcus's men has stumbled upon a decoy trap the brothers set days earlier. Gunfire erupts in short, controlled bursts, sending birds scattering into the sky. Toby clenches his fists, both anxious and relieved the distraction buys precious time, but the risk is high. Tana reaches a junction within the tunnels, a fork leading to an old maintenance shaft. He makes the split-second decision, choosing the left path. The passage narrows, forcing him to move carefully. The sound of distant vehicles grows louder, echoing unnervingly through the tunnel walls. His mind races, calculating every possible outcome, every possible ambush. Toby navigates the mill's perimeter, finding a concealed ledge that provides a wide vantage point over the valley. He scans for Tana, for Marcus, for any sign of movement. Through the haze of heat and dust, he catches a glimpse of his brother's motion across the ridge. Relief flares, but his fleeting danger is everywhere, omnipresent in the scorching, relentless landscape. Marcus, frustrated by the loss of immediate visual contact, tightens his strategy. Cut them off at the eastern pass. They'll have nowhere else to go. He signals his team, who move with silent precision, cutting through the desert with calculated urgency. The tension is palpable, like the calm before a storm. Every soldier aware that a single misstep could unravel the entire pursuit. Tana finally emerges from the tunnel into a rocky clearing, the sunlight harsh and unrelenting. He crouches behind a boulder, surveying the terrain, mapping out the next segment of the plan. Every movement is deliberate, every breath measured. He knows Toby is somewhere ahead, and the reunion at the pre-planned rendezvous is essential. The brothers cannot falter now. As the sun dips toward late afternoon, the desert air becomes a furnace, thick and suffocating. Toby and Tana inch closer toward their meeting points, weaving through the natural obstacles, staying invisible yet fully aware of the relentless eyes tracking their every move. The stakes have never been higher, the consequences never more severe. Above, Marcus tightens his grip on the binoculars, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "There are ghosts out here," he mutters. Alberto's gaze hardens. Not for long. But the desert, wide and unforgiving, holds secrets, shadows, and misdirections that even the most skilled hunters cannot anticipate. Every heartbeat, every rustle of stone, every whisper of wind is a countdown. Toby and Tana are threading a razor's edge between capture and freedom. their movements precise, their minds locked in a singular focus. And as the valley stretches endlessly before them, it becomes clear that this pursuit is not merely about survival, it is a test of will, ingenuity, and the unbreakable bond between brothers. The desert sun hangs low now, casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked earth. Toby moves with careful stealth, his boots stirring small clouds of sand as he skirts along the base of a rocky ridge. Every sound, the whistling of wind through canyons, the distant rumble of engines, the crunch of loose gravel underfoot feels amplified in the oppressive silence. He pauses, listening. Tanner is out there somewhere, a phantom threading his way through the labyrinth of desert rock, and Toby knows that if they can just meet, just synchronize, the final phase of their escape can begin. Tanner's route has taken him higher, across narrow ridgelines that slice like knives through the desert landscape. His fingers scrape against jagged stone for balance as he advances, eyes constantly scanning for the faintest sign of Marcus or Alberto. The heat radiates upward, distorting the horizon, making the ridge seem like a mirage. In a way, it works to his advantage, masking his movements from the patrols below. But the higher he climbs, the more exposed he becomes. One miscalculation, one slip, and the fall would be unforgiving. Meanwhile, Marcus and Alberto split their units into two, attempting to corner the brothers from opposite directions. Marcus, atop a boulder-strewn bluff, surveys the valley with binoculars, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. His experience tells him that the brothers are predictable in their unpredictability. They move carefully, yet they leave traces. Alberto coordinates a flanking maneuver, sending his best men through a series of narrow gullies, forcing the brothers into the open. Toby ducks behind a ridge crest, peering across a dried riverbed. He spots Tanner's figure momentarily against the ochre rock, motionless, scanning for pursuers. Relief flashes across Toby's face. He signals subtly with a hand gesture they had rehearsed long before any of this chaos began. Tanner notices and with a nod, begins to navigate down the other side of the ridge toward the rendezvous point. A sudden gust of wind sweeps through the valley, carrying dust and grit that blinds momentarily. A distant shout cracks through the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of automatic fire. Toby freezes, calculating the trajectory of bullets bouncing off rocks, estimating distance, predicting their path. He presses flat against the ground as rounds pepper the soil, mere inches from his position. The brothers had anticipated this. Tanner had laid a diversion several days earlier that had not yet revealed itself. Marcus's men had fallen for it, and Toby's patience now rewards him. Tanner negotiates a precarious ledge, balancing the need for speed with the danger of exposure. He knows that any hesitation could spell disaster. Every movement is choreographed. Yet, improvisation is inevitable in a terrain so wild and unforgiving. He leaps across a narrow crevice, landing with a silent grace that belies the pounding of his heart. A branch snaps beneath his foot, a near betrayal of his position. Instantly, he freezes, listening. Nothing. The desert swallows the sound, leaving only the oppressive heat and the distant buzz of helicopters beginning to circle overhead. Toby moves cautiously toward the canyon floor, guided by Tanner's last known location. He passes twisted iron remnants of old rail tracks, abandoned vehicles half buried in sand, and crumbling masonry that hints at some long-forgotten settlement. Every step is deliberate, measured, as he searches for the safe convergence point. His breaths are shallow, ears tuned to every shifting noise, every movement of dust. Marcus, realizing the brothers' intention, speeds up his flanking approach. He can sense the convergence, the inevitability of the encounter. They're heading for the gorge, he mutters to Alberto. If we cut them off here, it's over. Alberto nods grimly, accelerating their teams along the parallel path, careful to avoid detection. As the sun dips lower, casting the desert in a fiery glow, Toby finally catches sight of Tanner just ahead. Relief floods him briefly, quickly replaced by the adrenaline of knowing that Marcus and Alberto are closing in from both directions. They communicate silently with eyes and subtle gestures, syncing their movements perfectly. Every misstep now could unravel the entire plan. Tanner reaches the base of the canyon, signaling Toby to follow a hidden path along a dry river channel. They navigate the narrow passage, shadows stretching long and menacing across the rocky walls. Gunfire echoes faintly from above, but the brothers are largely concealed. They pause at a junction, crouching behind boulders, listening. Their breaths come fast, matching the rhythm of their racing minds. Suddenly, a small group of Marcus's men appears at the far end of the canyon, weapons raised. Toby and Tanner exchange a glance, This is the moment they must act decisively. Tanner fires a warning shot, sending rocks and gravel tumbling down toward the approaching officers, forcing them to take cover. Toby moves swiftly, flanking the group from the opposite side. The brothers coordinate instinctively, an unspoken bond guiding their actions. Shots ring out in rapid succession, ricocheting off canyon walls, echoing across the dry riverbed. Dust, smoke, and heat collide in a chaotic symphony, every second stretching into an eternity. The brothers use the terrain to their advantage, ducking, rolling, and firing with precision. Marcus's men return fire, but the brothers' knowledge of the canyon's every nook and cranny gives them the edge. Toby finally reaches the narrow tunnel that leads deeper into the canyon, signaling Tanner to follow. They slip into the darkness, shadows swallowing them, as the last rays of sunlight vanish behind the jagged cliffs. Behind them, the desert grows silent once more, the echoes of gunfire fading into the wind. Emerging in a secluded alcove, the brothers pause to catch their breath. Tanner wipes sweat and dust from his brow, glancing at Toby with a mix of exhaustion and relief. "We're not out of it yet," he says quietly. Toby nods, eyes scanning the hidden entrance from which they had just emerged. "But we're closer than we've ever been," he replies. Above, Marcus and Alberto regroup, frustrated but undeterred. They know the brothers are still out there, moving through terrain that is familiar only to them. The game is far from over, but the brothers have proven time and again that they are capable of outthinking, outmaneuvering, and surviving. The pursuit is relentless, but so is the resolve of Toby and Tanner. The desert night begins to settle over the valley, cooling the scorched earth, casting deep shadows across the rugged landscape. Toby and Tanner move carefully through the darkness, heading toward the next stage of their plan. Every step is deliberate, every decision critical. In this harsh, unforgiving world, survival depends on patience, cunning, and the unbreakable bond of family. The night deepens over Baktong Cross, stars scattered thinly above a desert sky painted in indigo and ash. Toby and Tanner advance cautiously, moving through a narrow wash lined with jagged rock formations that rise like sentinels over their path. Their footsteps are muted against the hard, dry earth, every movement calculated. Tanner carries a small pack with essentials. Toby grips the wheel of a collapsible pistol holster, constantly scanning the surroundings. Their breathing is steady but tense, a rhythm hammered into them by countless high-stakes pursuits in the past. Tanner pauses suddenly, raising a hand. "I hear something," he whispers, tilting his head to listen. The wind rustles through the sparse desert brush, carrying distant sounds, the faint drone of helicopters, the occasional bark of a desert coyote, and far off but unmistakable the clatter of boots on gravel. Toby nods, acknowledging the presence of danger. Their pursuers are closing in, relentless, and yet the brothers have learnt the terrain like a second skin. They know the desert can conceal just as easily as it exposes. Moving with the precision of seasoned tacticians, they navigate a series of narrow canyons, twisting and doubling back to lose the trail. Tanner stops again, crouching behind a sandstone outcrop. "We can't keep running like this," he mutters. "We need to hit them before they pin us down." Toby glances around, considering their options. Ahead lies a steep ridge, a natural choke point. If they can force their pursuers into it, they can control the engagement. Above, Marcus and Alberto coordinate their teams via radio. "They're heading for the ridge," Marcus says, squinting against the moonlight. "Set up positions on both sides. No mistakes." Alberto nods, directing squads to intercept while maintaining cover. The men move silently but swiftly, combing the terrain with the precision of professionals trained for high-stakes captures. They are closing in, driven by experience, duty, and an unspoken desire to see the pursuit end in their favor. Toby signals Tanner, pointing toward a narrow ledge that snakes along the canyon wall. "We flank from here. Quick and quiet," he whispers. Tanner nods, the tension in his shoulders easing only slightly. They climb carefully, every handhold tested before trust. Loose rocks shift beneath their weight, but their movements are synchronized, a dance honed by instinct and practice. The ridge offers a perfect vantage point. From there, the brothers can see the valley below, Marcus and Alberto's men advancing with methodical efficiency. The patrols are disciplined, but predictable patterns emerge, and Toby's eyes catch each one: the spacing between soldiers, the timing of their steps, the intervals between scans. Every pattern is a weakness they can exploit. Tanner readies a compact rifle, checking the chamber silently. Toby grips a pair of hand-thrown devices, crude yet effective, designed to create diversions. The brothers exchange a nod. It's time. Tanner fires the first shot, aimed deliberately to ricochet off a rock and send a cascade of pebbles into the valley. The sound echoes, drawing attention away from Toby as he prepares the diversion. Marcus's men react instinctively, scanning for the source. The first diversion explodes. A cloud of smoke and dust erupts at the opposite end of the canyon, obscuring movement. Panic briefly spreads through the ranks, soldiers halting to reassess the threat. Toby takes advantage, descending swiftly along a narrow path that skirts the ridge, closing the distance between him and a flank squad. Tanner provides cover, adjusting his aim with practiced precision, every shot calculated to disorient rather than kill. Marcus curses under his breath, realizing they are being manipulated. "They're splitting us," he mutters into his radio. Alberto replies calmly, "Hold positions. Don't pursue recklessly." But human nature and the intensity of the hunt make patience a rare commodity. The soldiers push forward, drawn into the canyon by the illusion of vulnerability. The brothers reach a natural choke point, a narrow stone bridge arching over a dried ravine. Tanner sets up a simple trip mechanism. Toby positions himself on a ledge above. As the first patrol crosses, the trap is triggered. Rocks cascade from above, forcing the soldiers to scatter, their disciplined advance turning chaotic. Shouts echo across the canyon walls as men scramble for cover. From their vantage point, Toby and Tanner move like shadows, slipping past pockets of disoriented troops. Their movements are fluid, instinctive. Every step is informed by years of evasion, by understanding both the psychology of pursuit and the raw mathematics of the terrain. The canyon is no longer just a route, it is a weapon, a tool of survival. Despite their advantage, the brothers know the danger is far from over. A helicopter's searchlight sweeps over the ridge, piercing the darkness, forcing them into deeper shadows. Tanner gestures to a side path leading to a hidden alcove, barely visible in the moonlight. They move silently, hearts pounding in rhythm with the distant rotors. Inside the alcove, they pause, taking stock. Tanner removes a small map, tracing potential escape routes and noting areas of likely surveillance. Toby reviews their supplies, ammunition, basic provisions, communication devices. Each detail matters. Each decision carries consequences. The alcove provides temporary safety, but also a critical decision point. Tanner breaks the silence. "We've bought ourselves time, but they'll regroup. We can't stay here long." Toby nods, eyes scanning the faint outlines of distant desert features. "We move at first light. Use the cover of dawn. The sand and rocks will be on our side." Tanner smiles grimly, appreciating the calm logic in the midst of chaos. Hours stretch slowly. The desert night offers eerie beauty, stars mirrored on dry riverbeds, the silhouettes of rugged cliffs standing like monuments to survival. The brothers sit in quiet tension, preparing for the next phase. They know Marcus and Alberto will push relentlessly, but they also know their own limits, their bond, and the way the terrain favors them. As the first hints of dawn brush the horizon, the desert glows faintly in hues of amber and rose. Toby and Tanner rise, shadows stretching long behind them. The canyon awaits, but now they move not just as fugitives, but as architects of the chase, shaping the flow of pursuit. With every calculated step, the day will bring new challenges. Yet they carry with them a quiet confidence born of experience, intuition, and the unbreakable bond that has carried them this far. They descend toward the next canyon floor, alert to every sound, ready for every possibility. The hunt continues, but the brothers remain a step ahead, ghosts of the desert, moving with a purpose that is clear, deliberate, and unyielding. The morning sun spills across the desert, sharp and bright, illuminating the arid landscape with a clarity that leaves no shadows untouched. Toby and Tanner move cautiously through the scrub and rocky terrain, their bodies low, eyes scanning every rise, every dip in the earth. Each step is calculated, each movement deliberate, as though the desert itself is an ally, or perhaps a silent judge of their actions. The wind carries faint smells, dust, sage, and the distant tang of diesel from approaching vehicles, but no sounds yet that would betray their position. Tanner glances back over his shoulder, squinting against the sun. "They'll be up soon," he says. His voice is low, a mixture of anticipation and impatience. "We can't keep hiding. We need to make them pay for every step they take toward us." Toby nods, his jaw tight. The weight of what's to come is heavy, but their strategy has been meticulous. Every rock formation, every ridge, every canyon bend has been catalogued mentally over countless rehearsals in the imagination, hours spent thinking like their pursuers. They approach a dry wash that cuts through the plateau, a natural funnel perfect for their next maneuver. Tanner drops his pack, pulling out a coil of wire and several small but deadly improvised devices. Toby checks his weapons, once more a pair of pistols, each holstered and ready, and a small rifle slung across his back. This has to slow them down, Toby murmurs, eyes scanning the canyon walls for vantage points. Tanner nods, setting the traps with surgical precision. Meanwhile, Marcus and Alberto regroup their forces. From a distant ridge, Marcus signals to his teams, splitting them into two converging groups. Keep them in the corridor, he instructs. Don't let them flank. Stay disciplined. Alberto moves along the far edge, communicating via radio with patrol units below. The sun glints off helmets and weapons as the soldiers adjust their formation. Methodical, relentless, driven by the thrill of pursuit and the responsibility of capture. Tanner signals Toby. Ready? The nod is silent but potent, a mutual understanding of what's about to unfold. They move to higher ground, each step calculated to avoid triggering the devices prematurely. When the soldiers finally advance into the wash, chaos erupts. Rocks tumble from above, dust clouds rise, and improvised devices detonate with sharp, echoing pops. The soldiers are momentarily disoriented, scrambling to regroup, shouting commands over the sudden clamor. From the ridge, Marcus curses under his breath, recognizing that the brothers have predicted their movements. They're anticipating us, he mutters. Stick to the plan. Don't let them dictate the engagement. But even as he issues orders, a small group of soldiers is caught in the trap, forced to retreat or risk injury. The terrain has become a weapon, shaped by those who know it intimately, bending the battlefield to their will. Toby and Tanner descend quickly, exploiting the confusion. Their movements are fluid, almost ghost-like, slipping between shadows and rocky outcrops. Tanner's rifle covers their advance, each shot aimed not for lethal effect, but to control, to herd, to manipulate the flow of the chase. Toby moves alongside, throwing small diversions that erupt into dust and noise, forcing the pursuers into predictable patterns. The interplay is a deadly ballet, choreographed by instinct, experience, and an intimate understanding of human behavior. As the wash narrows, the brothers encounter an unexpected obstacle barricade set by a forward patrol of Lockshaw's men. Tanner curses softly. They're adapting, he whispers. Toby scans the surrounding cliff's eyes, narrowing as he calculates. There is a ledge above, a precarious path but one that offers a perfect vantage. Up there, he says, pointing. They scramble, finding footing on jagged rocks, moving with the careful precision of climbers. Above, they pause briefly to assess the situation. Marcus and Alberto's units are approaching from multiple directions now, adjusting their tactics, responding to the chaos below. The soldiers move with discipline, but the unpredictability of the terrain and the brothers' traps has thrown a wrench into their plans. Toby leans over the ledge, eyes fixed on the advancing soldiers, calculating distances, angles, timing. Tanner prepares a small device, a makeshift distraction designed to amplify the chaos. The first device detonates, sending a cloud of smoke and debris into the soldiers' path. They hesitate, scanning, shouting commands, trying to regain control of the corridor. Toby signals Tanner, and the second device goes off, a coordinated sequence that splits the units, leaving some trapped in narrow passages while others are forced to retreat or climb under fire. The desert canyon has become a gauntlet, each step fraught with danger, each decision critical. Marcus curses again, recognizing the brothers' mastery of the terrain. They're ghosts, he mutters. This isn't just a chase. They're shaping the battlefield. Watch every movement. Don't underestimate them. Alberto moves to flank from another ridge, but even as he positions his men, he realizes the brothers are already anticipating their moves, countering before they can fully execute. Toby and Tanner seize the opportunity. They descend into a hidden alcove, a narrow passage carved by centuries of erosion. Tanner uses a small rope to pull supplies up to a safer vantage, while Toby scans the ridges above for snipers. They are both aware that the confrontation is escalating, that mistakes could be fatal, yet they remain focused, calculating each move with precision. Suddenly, a shadow moves above the glint of a sniper scope, catches Toby's eye. He signals Tanner, and they move in a coordinated rush, using natural cover to avoid detection. The sniper fires, a single shot ringing out, striking the ground inches from Toby. Tanner returns fire, aiming to force the sniper back, not to kill, but to buy time. The tension is palpable, each heartbeat echoing in the canyon like a drum. The brothers regroup in a narrow corridor, pressed against the canyon wall. Tanner glances at Toby, eyes filled with a mix of adrenaline and determination. "We've slowed them down," he says. Toby nods, the silent acknowledgement between them carrying the weight of every chase. Every close call, every plan executed flawlessly under pressure. From their position, they can see the advancing forces, a wall of men in disciplined formation. Marcus and Alberto are coordinating, aware that the brothers are clever, adaptable, and dangerous. But Toby and Tanner are not merely evading, they are shaping the engagement, dictating the pace, turning the terrain into an ally. The canyon echoes with the sounds of preparation, weapons being readied, commands shouted, dust shifting under boots. Toby takes a deep breath, the dry air filling his lungs. "This next move has to count," he murmurs. Tanner nods, understanding perfectly. They are not just surviving, they are controlling the battle, turning the hunter into the hunter. As the sun climbs higher, illuminating the canyon walls in harsh light, the brothers prepare for the next phase, knowing that every decision, every step, every shot could be decisive. The pursuit has become more than survival, it is strategy, psychology, and sheer willpower, a testament to the bond between the brothers and their mastery of the desert. The afternoon sun beats down on the canyon like a relentless hammer, turning the rocks into molten gold and casting long, harsh shadows that shift with every passing hour. Toby and Tanner move like shadows themselves, sliding along narrow ledges, ducking behind jagged outcroppings, their eyes scanning constantly for any sign of movement from Marcus and Alberto's forces. Sweat trickles down their temples, drying instantly in the scorching air. But there is no time to pause, no moment to let fear take root. Tanner whispers, "We've got to split 'em again. They're getting too organized." His voice carries the urgency of experience, the clarity of someone who has lived through every conceivable contingency and come out alive. Toby nods, his expression grim. He knows that the next move has to be decisive. They can't afford to be cornered in this unforgiving terrain. He studies the canyon walls, noting every crevice, every overhang, every shadow that could serve as cover or concealment. The desert is their ally if they respect it. It can also become a grave if they make even the smallest miscalculation. Using a series of hand signals, the brothers coordinate their split. Tanner moves to a higher ridge with a scoped rifle, a vantage point that allows him to cover Toby's descent into the canyon floor. He sets up small, improvised tripwires and motion-triggered diversions, each one designed to fragment the pursuing units and force them into a reactive posture. Toby moves swiftly, almost gliding along the sand and rock, a ghost weaving through the terrain, avoiding the open ground where the soldiers might spot him. Marcus, observing from his elevated position, clenches his jaw. They're anticipating every move. He mutters to Alberto. They're not just running, they're controlling the battlefield. He signals his teams to tighten their formation, attempting to box the brothers in, but the canyon itself resists their efforts. Every ridge, every sudden drop, every crevice gives Toby and Tanner an advantage. And Marcus knows it. The hunters are struggling to adapt to the hunter's intimate knowledge of the terrain. A distant shout echoes through the canyon, an alert from one of the advancing units. Toby freezes, listening, then slides into a shadowed recess as a group of soldiers passes just meters away, oblivious to his presence. The sand shifts under their boots, the metallic glint of their weapons catching fleeting rays of sunlight. His heart pounds in rhythm with their movements, but his breathing is controlled, his mind calculating angles, distances, and timing with surgical precision. Tanner's shots crack the air intermittently, each one forcing the soldiers to hesitate, duck, or scatter. He doesn't aim to kill outright, he aims to control, to manipulate the flow of the engagement, to channel the soldiers into predictable pathways where Toby can exploit them. The coordination is near flawless, a silent communication passed through subtle gestures, shared glances, and instinct honed over countless encounters. Below, Toby encounters a narrow side canyon that twists like a serpent, a path that offers both concealment and danger. He carefully tests each step, avoiding loose rocks that could betray his position. He pauses near a jagged overhang, taking in the scene. Marcus's units are regrouping, trying to anticipate the bros' next move, but the canyon's complex geometry and the cleverly laid diversions are turning their strategy into a guessing game. Toby allows himself a brief nod. This is working, exactly as planned. The next sequence is delicate. Toby needs to create a diversion that will lure a significant portion of Marcus's forces away from Tanner's Ridge. He pulls from his pack a compact, timed device, placing it strategically near a narrow choke point. The device erupts in a controlled burst of smoke and fire, sending soldiers scattering and calling out alarms. From his perch, Tanner sees the chaos and moves to capitalize, firing precise shots to disrupt their cohesion further. The coordination is seamless, a dance of tactical awareness and raw instinct. Marcus curses under his breath, recognizing the pattern. "They're predicting us at every turn," he says. He orders his units to form a tighter, defensive formation, but the canyon's twists and turns frustrate their efforts. The brothers are forcing them into mistakes, shaping the battlefield without ever being fully seen. Alberto attempts to flank from a distant ridge, but even that move is anticipated. The brothers have left subtle traps, diversions designed to slow him and draw him off course. Toby pauses briefly to catch his breath, surveying the situation. He can see the soldiers struggling to maintain cohesion, the canyon echoing with the sounds of shouts, gunfire, and detonations from the brothers' improvised devices. Each moment brings them closer to exhaustion, while the brothers, fueled by adrenaline and determination, remain focused. Tanner signals from above, and Toby nods, understanding immediately the final phase is approaching. They converge at a narrow canyon bottleneck, the perfect place to force a decisive engagement. Tanner fires a series of shots, pinning down the soldiers at the rear while Toby moves forward, using shadow as a natural cover to approach undetected. The soldiers are trapped between the canyon walls and the relentless ingenuity of the brothers. Every move they make is anticipated, every advance countered. The canyon has become a crucible, a testing ground where strategy, knowledge, and nerve determine survival. Suddenly, a shot rings out loud, precise. One of Marcus's sharpshooters has located Toby, but before they can take aim again, Tanner fires, forcing them to retreat and creating a clear path for Toby to advance. The balance of power is shifting. The brothers are no longer just evading, they are asserting control, using the canyon, their devices, and their mastery of timing to dictate the flow of battle. Toby reaches a strategic high point, an overhang that allows him to observe the entire bottleneck. He signals Tanner, who descends carefully from his ridge, and together they execute a series of coordinated movements that fracture Marcus's units completely. Soldiers are forced to retreat into tight spaces, some tripping over improvised obstacles, others caught in the confusion of smoke and debris. The brothers move with precision, herding the troops into predictable positions while avoiding direct confrontation themselves. The afternoon drags on, heat shimmering off the rocks, sweat and dust coating every exposed surface. Marcus and Alberto realize that brute force will not win. Here the brothers are too clever, too intimately connected to the terrain. They begin to call for reinforcements, attempting to rethink their strategy. But the chaos the brothers have created buys time, disorients their commanders, and fractures their resolve. Toby glances at Tanner, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They have outmaneuvered, outplanned, and outlasted, turning a pursuit into a controlled engagement that leaves the hunters reacting instead of acting. The canyon, once a simple landscape of rock and sand, has become a weapon, a shield, and a stage for their ingenuity. Every detonation, every diversion, every calculated step has been designed to maximize their advantage. As the sun begins to dip, casting long, jagged shadows across the canyon floor, the brothers press forward, their next move setting the stage for the confrontation that will decide the outcome of this relentless pursuit. Marcus and Alberto regroup as best they can, but the advantage now firmly rests with Toby and Tanner. Their command of the terrain and their coordination turning the desert into an unassailable fortress of strategy. The canyon's shadows stretched longer, like skeletal fingers creeping across the jagged rocks. A chill began to settle into the evening air. Toby and Tanner moved with deliberate caution, their bodies taut with anticipation. They knew this terrain intimately, but they also knew their pursuers, Marcus and Alberto, were relentless, adaptive, and willing to risk everything to close the distance. Every single footstep could reveal their position. Every sound could invite a deadly response. Tanner paused on a narrow ridge, his eyes scanning the canyon floor below. "They're regrouping," he whispered, his voice barely disturbing the silence. "I can see pockets of them trying to flank us, but we anticipated it. The traps are set." He gestured toward their improvised obstacles, carefully planned rock slides, hidden tripwires, and smoke diversions. These traps were designed to fragment Marcus's forces, forcing them to break formation and take positions that left them exposed. Toby nodded, acknowledging the meticulous orchestration of chaos. As they descended into a narrower section of the canyon, he noticed subtle signs that the soldiers were adapting, adjusting their movements to avoid the most obvious hazards. This wasn't just a chase. It was a chess match, played in 3 dimensions. The brothers had to anticipate not only the moves already made, but also the ones yet to come. He signaled to Tanner, and they split up for a moment, creating false openings to lure the troops deeper into confined areas where they could be easily disoriented. Marcus's voice echoed through the canyon, his orders distorted and fragmented into disjointed shouts. Confusion began to spread among his units. Some soldiers hesitated, others misstepped, and a few even tried to retreat, only to find themselves caught in the thick smoke and dust generated by Tanner's perfectly timed diversions. Toby moved like a ghost, using every shadow and irregularity in the canyon walls for cover. He was approaching a critical point, a spot where he could observe the entire corridor without being seen. Suddenly, a sharp metallic clang resonated through the air. A soldier had triggered one of the improvised traps. The sound ricocheted off the canyon walls, causing a chain reaction of alerts among the soldiers as they scrambled to regain order. Tanner seized the opportunity. He fired precision shots into the air, not to hit anyone, but to push the units toward predictable paths. Their coordination was flawless. Distraction, containment, and manipulation, all executed with almost surgical precision. Toby finally reached the bottleneck, a natural choke point where the canyon walls narrowed to barely 3 feet apart. He carefully positioned himself behind an overhanging rock, peering down to see Marcus's units funneled into the constrained space. The soldiers were tightly packed, their movements limited, their options few. He signaled Tanner, who had positioned himself on a higher ridge to cover his movements. The stage was set for their decisive maneuver. With a subtle gesture, Toby triggered a small device. It produced a sudden, thick cloud of smoke and a concussive shock that disoriented the soldiers below. Shouts erupted and chaos spread like wildfire through the formation. Some soldiers stumbled, others fired blindly into the smoke, their cohesion completely unraveling. Tanner's shots pinned them down further, forcing them to react to the illusion of threats rather than the brothers' actual positions. The canyon itself had become a weapon, wielded by those who understood its intricate secrets. From his ridge, Tanner watched the soldiers desperately trying to regroup. He adjusted his aim to create controlled chaos, targeting the empty spaces between soldiers to force movement without lethal engagement. It was a delicate balance. Every decision had to manipulate their actions without revealing the brothers' ultimate plan. Toby moved fluidly along the ledge below, setting additional diversions, redirecting the pursuit, and ensuring the soldiers remained in a state of perpetual disarray. Marcus, realizing that this disorientation was far more effective than brute force, tried to coordinate flanking maneuvers. He ordered Alberto to take a smaller unit along a secondary ridge, attempting to cut off their escape routes. But Toby had anticipated this. He had prepared a countermeasure, a narrow rock slide, perfectly positioned to be triggered at just the right moment. Tanner gave the signal. With a precise motion, Toby dislodged the rocks, sending them tumbling down with a controlled roar. Alberto's unit was forced to retreat, their formation disrupted, their confidence shaken. They were pushed right back into the canyon bottleneck, increasing their vulnerability. The canyon floor now resembled a chaotic labyrinth, with soldiers scattered everywhere, unable to maintain an organized pursuit. In stark contrast, Toby and Tanner moved with unerring purpose, flowing through the terrain like shadows. Each of their actions reinforced the other, creating an almost telepathic synchronization between them. Tanner noticed movement on the far side, a lone sniper, attempting to find a vantage point. But he was too late. A small, subtle trap sent the sniper sprawling, alerting the rest of the unit to the invisible hazards that surrounded them. Time seemed to stretch, the canyon echoing with a cacophony of struggle, shouts, and the occasional metallic clang of equipment striking unseen forces. The brothers pressed forward, pushing the soldiers into a confined sector of the canyon where a final set of diversions awaited. Toby positioned himself at a high point, surveying the flow of the troops, while Tanner controlled the upper ridge, ensuring that every movement below was anticipated and directed. Marcus and Alberto, frustrated and exhausted, attempted to consolidate their remaining forces. They shouted orders, but the canyon's natural acoustics distorted their communication. The soldiers were caught between the disorienting smoke, the unseen diversions, and the relentless pressure from the brothers. Toby signaled to Tanner. It was time to execute the final sequence. Tanner dropped small explosives into precise positions, creating controlled detonations that forced the soldiers into panic-driven movements. The bottleneck became a maelstrom of chaos. Soldiers stumbled, misstepped, and tried to regroup, only to find every avenue blocked or trapped. Toby moved swiftly, descending along the canyon edge, using the natural shadows for concealment, while Tanner maintained suppression from above. Each action was carefully measured, designed not to kill, but to maintain control and create the conditions for a decisive advantage. Marcus finally realized that brute force was no longer an option. His units were fragmented, their cohesion destroyed, their ability to adapt completely limited. He signaled a retreat, but even as he did, the canyon continued to funnel his soldiers into zones of vulnerability. Toby and Tanner, despite their fatigue and the relentless heat, maintained their focus. Every step, every motion, every diversion had been calculated, turning the terrain itself into their most powerful ally. A sudden flare erupted from the canyon floor of his final diversion. It was a controlled burst that disoriented the last remaining soldiers. The echo reverberated through the canyon, the chaos peaked, and the units were effectively neutralized. Toby and Tanner paused for a moment, surveying the results of their work. The canyon, once a passive landscape, had been transformed into a strategic instrument, amplifying their skill and planning. Tanner lowered his rifle and nodded to Toby. "We've done it," he said. "Every move anticipated, every path controlled. We've turned the hunters into the prey." Toby allowed himself a brief exhale, knowing the immediate danger had passed, though the larger conflict was far from over. Marcus and Alberto regrouped at a safe distance, visibly shaken, their plans unraveled, their units dispersed. The canyon, bathed in the orange glow of sunset, stretched silently around the brothers. The dust began to settle, the echoes of chaos faded, and a brief, hard-won calm descended. They both knew this respite was temporary. The world outside the canyon would continue to demand choices, sacrifices, and confrontation. But for now, they had leveraged strategy, terrain, and ingenuity to survive against overwhelming odds. Toby turned to Tanner, a faint smile breaking through the tension on his face. "We're not out of this," he said, "but we've proven we can control the battlefield." Tanner nodded, acknowledging the truth in his brother's words. Every scar, every bruise, every drop of sweat had been an investment in their survival. It was a demonstration that intellect, foresight, and instinct could outmatch even the most organized force. As night fell over the canyon, the brothers gathered themselves, checking their weapons, reinforcing their positions, and preparing for the next phase of the pursuit. Their bond, strengthened by this shared struggle, had become an unspoken advantage. The terrain might be treacherous, and the enemy relentless, but the coordination between Toby and Tanner ensured that they were always one step ahead. They were the invisible masters of a battlefield few others could ever navigate. The stars emerged, cold and distant, indifferent to the chaos below. Yet within the canyon, a different order existed, a testament to preparation, resilience, and the unbreakable connection between two brothers who refused to yield. Every decision, every risk, every maneuver had been a calculated choice, turning desperation into dominance, and setting the stage for the next chapter of this relentless pursuit. The streets of Backton Cross were quiet, the aftermath of chaos lingering in the warm California air. Smoke from distant fires and the faint hum of helicopters reminded the city that the conflict was indeed fully over. Bob and Willa sat in the stolen car, parked atop a hill overlooking the city's outskirts. The tension between them, thick as molasses, began to unravel in the safety of silence. Willa's hands trembled slightly as she held the letter from Perfidia, the words inside weighing on her like a physical object. "I never knew," Willa whispered, her voice catching, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Bob didn't reply immediately. He let her absorb the truth, the decades of lies, the revolutionary fervor, and the sacrifices that shaped both their lives. Finally, he spoke, calm but raw. She loved you, Willa. Every choice she made, every risk she took, it was for you, even when she couldn't show it. Willa exhaled, letting the letter flutter slightly in her lap, her gaze drifting over the horizon. But why did she leave us? Why couldn't she stay? The weight of teenage disillusionment and betrayal merged with the grief she had carried for years. Bob's eyes, heavy with both relief and pain, met hers. "Sometimes people have to fight their battles in ways we can't understand. She thought she was protecting you by keeping her distance." They shared a long, contemplative silence. Bob finally turned the ignition, the car rumbling as they merged onto the winding roads leading back toward the city. Their journey was more than physical. It was a reconciliation. A bridge across fractured trust, years of lies, and the lingering shadow of Perfidia's choices. Meanwhile, Lockjaw, battered, scarred, and seething with defeat, had retreated to a safe house far from prying eyes. He sat in darkness, analyzing every misstep, every rebellion thwarted. Even in his apparent survival, there was no triumph, only The heavy awareness that his obsession with Perfidia and Willa had brought ruin to his control. For a man who once orchestrated operations with ruthless precision, the taste of failure was almost intoxicating. He drafted plans, recalculated, and realized that the tide had irrevocably turned against him. The city, the revolutionaries, and even time itself were beyond his dominion now. As Bob and Willa returned home, the sanctuary city of Bacton Cross welcomed them not with fanfare, but with quiet acknowledgement. Neighbors peeked from windows, recognizing that the upheaval had ended, that life would resume in its fractured, imperfect rhythm. Willa stepped out of the car, feeling the familiar yet distant embrace of normalcy. Bob followed, handing her a small, folded envelope, a final note from Perfidia, left with instructions only a daughter could understand. The letter, simple yet profound, spoke of love, hope, and the unbreakable bond between parent and child. Willa read it slowly, her eyes widening as she absorbed the sentiments, the apologies, and the promises. She laughed softly, a sound unburdened by fear or anger, and then hugged Bob tightly. "We survived," she murmured, and for the first time in years, the statement carried more than mere relief. It carried a sense of victory. Across town, remnants of the French 75 began reassembling. Though diminished, their spirit was unbroken. Deandra, Sergio, and other members quietly regrouped, repairing communications, tending to the wounded, and sharing stories of heroism that would become legend. Even the most cautious knew that the struggle for justice and autonomy was far from over. Yet there was satisfaction in the moment, a victory forged in resilience, courage, and the unrelenting bond of family. Lockjaw's fate was sealed quietly, almost ironically. A subtle miscalculation in his attempts to regain power led to his capture by members of the Christmas Adventure within the sterile confines of a clandestine facility. He was neutralized efficiently, his reign of terror extinguished without spectacle. Reports circulated quickly as end marked, not with chaos, but with finality, the kind that underscores justice without fanfare. The city exhaled, the shadow of his manipulations lifted, allowing space for recovery and reflection. Bob and Willa, walking together along the dusty back streets of Bacton Cross, reflected on their journey. Every confrontation, every narrow escape, and every hard-learned lesson had shaped them into survivors. Bob handed Willa her backpack, packed with supplies and a journal, symbolic of her autonomy and resilience. "Your fight is just beginning," he said. "But now, you know who you are and who you can trust." Willa nodded, determination sparkling in her eyes. She stepped toward the horizon, the sunset painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, ready to face a world that had tried to define her, constrain her, and overwhelm her. Bob watched, pride swelling, recognizing that the daughter he had protected and the revolutionary he had become were intertwined in ways he had never anticipated. The film concluded with quiet reverence, lingering on the silhouettes of Bob and Willa against the fading light. The city, scarred but enduring, breathed alongside them. Every betrayal, every battle, every act of courage had converged to this singular moment of clarity. Survival is not merely about living, it is about reclaiming agency, restoring bonds, and moving forward with integrity. As credits rolled, viewers were left with a profound sense of completion, a story that traversed rebellion, love, vengeance, and redemption, culminating in the unwavering message that even in a world marred by chaos, the human spirit endures, unbroken and resolute.